So my topic is the multi-state outbreak of Salmonella Typhimurium infections linked to tomatoes. So this is step one, background information. Salmonella Typhimurium are bacteria found in raw infected foods or undercooked meats. They're, as shown by this topic, they're now being found in tomatoes and other fruits and vegetables. They're known to cause illness, and depending on the age, could cause severe illness too. Um, for those with weak immune systems, may need to be hospitalized and would need to use antibiotics, but it will go away within a week. Symptoms include diarrhea, cramps, fever. Step 2, current situation. Many public health officials helped the CDC in determining if Salmonella typhimurium infections is linked to tomatoes. By this, I mean Vermont State Public Health Laboratory conducted many studies on the infected tomatoes. Strengths in the study are as listed. They grabbed the tomatoes that they saw were infected and therefore isolated those tomatoes and identified the strands of bacteria, which turned out to be Salmonella typhimurium. The CDC posted updates about anything new found about Salmonella typhimurium found in tomatoes. Also, public health officials from all around the U.S. conducted studies on these tomatoes as described by the Vermont State Public Health Laboratory. As seen here, these are where the most states were infected by Salmonella. They were with Salmonella typhimurium that were linked to their tomatoes. There were more cases in other states than in most. Like this one, the white ones obviously had none. The rest, some of them ranged to 3 to 2 to 1. So that's just what this graph is saying. Prioritize core issues. The root problem of this illness are tomatoes being infected with Salmonella typhimurium, and it was detected in restaurant tomatoes. They could have been contaminated through shipments or as seen in studies before harvest, which means contamination in the soil and water. As stated by the CDC in 2006, there were around 183 cases throughout the U.S. Towards the end of the year, between September and October, 93% of the 183 cases were between those months. The good thing was that there was no mortalities, but around 12% were hospitalized for contracting Salmonella typhimurium linked to tomatoes. Analyze alternatives. I use the health communication planning cycle model as step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. With the infected tomatoes, there would be a pre-testing where research will take place. They'll figure out where to take place and when. They would grab samples of soil and water to check if Salmonella is present pre-harvest. Implementation of program to routinely check the soil and water for any disease. From their evaluation, if there are no more, if they see that this program is effective, then they will continue doing it. If not, then they would have to go back to planning and strategy development. Approach 1 would have to recall the tomatoes sold in restaurants that are making people sick, or markets, whichever have tomatoes that are linked to Salmonella typhimurium. Approach 2 would have routine checks at places growing these tomatoes with Salmonella. So the place where these tomatoes with Salmonella are being made, they would have to recall those and check that soil and water for any contamination. Next would be recommendations. One recommendation would be public health officials should have a routine checkup on produce that is being made and should have a checklist of what is safe. What is meant here is by checking the water, as in the irrigation system, studying the soil that the produce is in to make sure that it isn't contaminated with Salmonella typhimurium. Second recommendation, if a restaurant is flagged or a market with contaminated produce, in this case tomatoes, even if it's just one case and people are developing symptoms of Salmonella, the restaurant or market should be shut down and checked for contamination and should be able to determine when to reopen again. Step 6, action plan. In 2022, the contaminated water and soil will be checked routinely and should be on track to be rid of any disease, especially Salmonella, by 2025. In 2026, there will be a for sure that all tomatoes that have Salmonella typhimurium will be eradicated or discarded from its contamination of pre-harvest. And in that sense, irrigation systems and the soils will be fixed and safe to grow more produce in. From so on, there will be routine checkups on produce, and what I mean about this is that they'll make sure that everything's safe, that everything that's being shipped is okay, and that's what is meant by that. That there will just be a program implemented to make sure that everything is basically following protocol. Step 7, opinions. I have always been scared of contracting salmonella. I didn't even know that it could be in tomatoes. And now, as I read an article, there was actually salmonella linked to onions. As a consumer, I would want the food I eat to not be contaminated with salmonella, as I believe that many people would agree with me. That's why I believe that public health officials should have a program to be able to check all this and make sure that everything is safe to be distributed and eaten by us, the consumers. They should have routine checkups, as I recommended, and they should make sure that the food that, like I said, the food that's being distributed throughout the U.S. is safe to eat. And that is my presentation on the outbreak of Salmonella Typhimurium infections linked to tomatoes, the multistate.